Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna be featuring the Marceau. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation terribly, I apologize for that. It is the upcoming Tier 10 premium French destroyer. Now before I get into the ship, thank you very much for all the subs you've dropped me on YouTube. I appreciate it a ton. I'm continuing that grind, and that goal of 100k is still in my mind. So just giving you a big thank you for taking the time to drop a sub. I really do appreciate it. The Marceau, well, I'm going to be heavily comparing this thing to the Kleber, because in most ways it really is like a Kleber. The surface concealment is identical, the new nerfed concealment. Basically, when they nerfed Kleber, they nerfed this thing at the same time. It has exactly the same health pool, 21.9, with HP perk 25.4. It has the same ridiculous speed of 44 knots, and with that 20% speed boost, of course, 50 or 55 knots. Rudder shift 4.8, 740 meter turning circle, basically identical values to the Kleber. And it also has 8 guns, but the guns is where the significant differences start to arise. Whereas the Kleber has 839mm guns, the Marceau has 827mm guns. Now these guns are actually identical to the ones that were on the Colbert. And when this thing first came out, it actually had the same damage values as the Colbert guns as well. But they have since nerfed the DPM values, so it no longer does, what is it, 2.1k per HE shell. They nerfed it to 1.850, and basically they've toned them down. But in terms of shell velocity, it's very identical to the Colbert guns. There are both advantages and disadvantages. First of all, the default range is only 11.5. unlike Kleber's 13.6. The reload, on the other hand, is 3.5, whereas Kleber has 7 seconds, but of course you have to remember that you can't run reload booster on this thing the same way you can on the Kleber. The turret traverse, whereas Kleber's turret traverse is sluggish, this thing has an amazing turret traverse of 6 seconds for 180 degrees. So it's really fast, nimble guns. But here you can of course see the first downsides of having these Colbert guns, and that is of course that the shell arcs are pitiful. It's much harder to land shells at targets further away, and any sort of maneuvering makes it quite easy to dodge Marceau guns at range. So it very much feels like they slapped 8 Colbert guns on a Kleber and called it a new ship. There are, as I mentioned, up and downsides. The downside is it's much harder to land shells, and you of course lack the penetration, very hard to hit nimble targets, you don't have that DPM booster. But in terms of pure DPM values, the difference is significant. You have almost twice as much DPM as a Kleber. Your default DPM is 254, Kleber has 137. If you build both ships for guns, you still end up with 320k DPM versus 173k. So in terms of DPM, this thing actually has the highest DPM of these tier 10 DDs. Even the Haruguma can only reach 303k DPM. The Daring reaches 309. Now Haruguma of course has improved penetration, which means all these shatters that I'm getting, well, it wouldn't be getting nearly as many. The only thing that the Montana could shatter with would be that 38mm deck armor. So Haruguma's DPM, even though theoretically lower, effectively still, of course, significantly higher because of this much better penetration. But the fire chance is only 7%. With full DE and fire chance build, as I think I'm running here, you reach 10%. But I actually have some of the worst RNG on fires ever this game. I'm already warning you right now that it's gonna greatly impact my damage. Sorry for a bit of coughing, my throat is a bit sore. But it is generally a really good fire starter, except when being piloted by me, because clearly my RNG is cursed right now. Still, the gameplay is very much a fast, mobile HE spammer that is hard to hit and doesn't have a citadel. Very questionable. The AP DPM is of course equally monstrous. It has 424k AP DPM. The Haruguma actually has better AP DPM, so it can't beat quite that IGN AP because the AP alpha is just too low to make up for it. The AP pen is really good. It's better than what the Swedes have. It's at 10 kilometers, it's a bit over 100 millimeters. What this means is, of course, that you can citadel several light cruisers at medium ranges quite comfortably. Something that other DDs might suffer with. Kleber, no, but for example, Z52, Yu Yang, submerged gearing, all these things, they will struggle to citadel light cruisers, whereas the Marceau can absolutely get away with it, especially if you get close enough. At 5 kilometers, you have a 155mm pen, which would already theoretically be enough to citadel Des Moines. So better AP in that sense. The other difference that you probably saw right there is, of course, the torpedoes. Whereas the Kleber has insanely fast 8 km torpedoes, 75 knots, and so forth, the Marceau has 9 km range torpedoes. But these only do 60 knots. They are significantly stealthier in return. They are 1.3 km detectability, which is actually really, really stealthy for torps this fast. But the damage on them is 15k, which is less than what you get on the Kleber, and the reload on them is significantly longer than Kleber's. Whereas Kleber reloads the torps in 77 seconds, the Marceau reloads the torpedoes in 120. So big difference on the reload, which means, of course, that you do pretty much half the torpedo DPM of the Kleber, and you also do significantly less alpha strike, 178 versus 221. But that's the cost you have to pay for getting that increased range. And the Marceau kind of does need that range. Although, as a YOLO boat, you are just as scary as a Kleber because, well, obviously you are stupidly fast. Here's some of that AP penetration that I spoke of, and that AP DPM. Catching this off guard, or well, catching him in a mid-turn and making use of all that AP DPM. A lot of overpens, actually, a bit of surprising amount of overpens, but the damage does its job and the Zao goes down for the 4th kill this game. It has, of course, that same strangely saturated hull that the Kleber has, which means it's actually quite difficult to take down, quite difficult to burst down, in fact. But, as mentioned, very, very hard to actually hit targets far away. Only really battleships can be effectively farmed at long ranges, anything else, not so much. AA is, of course, worth mentioning, because this thing, unlike the Kleber, that has that 3.8 km AA, the Marceau does have these, I assume the guns are just dual purpose, which means that you have 6 km AA range, and more importantly, you have access to defensive AA. Yu Yang doesn't want to do what he's doing right now. Against the Yu Yang, where you get only score full penetrations, basically against other DDs, the Marceau HEDPM is just murderous, and he has absolutely no chance of taking this fight, and he is forced to flee and disengage. But defensive AA plus these dual-purpose guns means that in terms of AA, the Marceau is actually quite strong. You can defend yourself very effectively against carriers. Well, very effectively might be stressing it a bit, because ultimately you oftentimes want to build what I'm building here, the gunboat build, because, well, that's pretty much what the ship is all about. It doesn't really have the ambush potential of the Kleber because it doesn't have that same AP penetration values. So the main issue, of course, becomes that your plane spotting is quite atrocious. Something like 4.8 kilometers if you're not building stealth, I think. And for a carrier, that means even if you're running defensive AA, and you're focusing the sector, as long as he doesn't sail headfirst into every single flak cloud you're throwing out, he will obviously get those rocket strikes in anyway. You will eventually kill the planes, but not before they get their strikes in. So the ship is still vulnerable to carriers. Less vulnerable than, let's say, the Kleber, because of the defensive AA, but absolutely still vulnerable because of that. So ultimately, we come down to what exactly is the purpose of this ship. And I really have a hard time answering that. Many of the complaints raised by the community lately has been regarding HE spammers. People really don't like the prevalence of HE spammers being added to the game. We've had, well, most notably, of course, Smolensk. And people actively really dislike fighting against the ship. And the Colbert isn't nearly as oppressive as the Smolensk, mostly because Colbert is so vulnerable. It's very easy to citadel that ship, it's large, it's has no armor. If you hit it, you're basically automatically citadeling it. It is a easy ship if it's caught in the open, it's an easy ship to punish, and it's not nearly as noob friendly as the Smolensk, where you can just park full broadside, get Urpens, smoke up, and then sit in cover and farm. It's not nearly as friendly as that one. It also has much harder arcs to hit with. So I have to wonder what exactly prompted Wargaming to introduce the Marceau that has no citadel, is as fast as a Kleber, but still provides this massive HE farming DPM. Of course, this speed means that if you play it just like a cruiser, which is what I'm doing here, is either you're moving agile on the map very quickly, being hard to hit, with people struggling to actually get the correct lead on you, or you use your great speed and these arcs to just basically island hop. I've been, until this point, I've had enough health to fight in the open, but now that I'm going low health, well, now I just, instead of playing it like a Kaba, I start playing it like a Colbert, which means we park behind islands and we use island cover and we just lob shells over island and we farm people. And I don't know what makes Wargaming think that anyone is going to particularly enjoy fighting against this ship. This seems like really a horrendous experience to fight against. Your average potato player, he probably won't be too effective in this thing, but even hitting him is going to be difficult, because the ship is going to be doing 55 knots and people building for range will still have a pretty insane 16 km range, which means if you're trying to push in a battleship or just kite away or whatever, it doesn't take too much skill to be able to farm you. I have to question this choice. I have to question adding a ship so obviously toxic and so obviously against everything people want. Like, I don't think there's anyone who goes, hey, you know what we really need? We need this hybrid of the Kaba and the Kleber that's even more defensible against carriers, so you can't really get rid of it easily. And then we're gonna give it these Colbert arcs, which means you can park behind basically any island and just farm and farm and farm and farm. I really don't like the addition of this ship. No, it's not as bad as the Smolensk, because it doesn't have quite those insane DPM values, and it's obviously more difficult to play than a Smolensk. But that doesn't mean I find this to be a particularly healthy addition to the game in any way. Like, that Thunder is 15.4 km away, and he's being farmed from behind an island by a destroyer. It feels stupid. And something like a Salem, I have no worries about popping out from behind the smoke and picking a fight with him, for the simple reason that a Salem will pretty much not have any chances of landing shells on me. Well, he basically has to take a really, really amazingly impressive lead to land any shells, because I'm doing 46, 47, 48, 49, 50 knots, and for Salem's slow shell velocity, good luck getting any hits in on that. For most other DDs, good luck getting any hits in on that. Basically, if a DD wants to hit this thing, the DD has to get so close that they will melt under Marceau's guns if they try. So, why Wargaming? Just why? This game, not really that interesting until this point. I sail into A, I hide behind an island and farm, and I camp it, and ultimately this game ends quite quickly. There's not really much point in showing it, because not too much else exciting things happen. The same playstyle of the Marceau plays out, and it does, unlike the Kleber, which at least has that ambush potential, because of that amazing AP pen, which means it rewards you for ambushing cruisers, picking fights, and basically using your stealth at some time. In a Marceau, there is very little point. You want to be shooting all the time. Guns a-blazing, 24/7 HE spam, and because he's faster than all other ships, you can't really outrun him, and you can't move to the other side of the map to avoid him either, because the ship, once again, incredibly quick. It will be on the other side of the map waiting for you if you try. In the hands of good players, this thing will be an absolute nightmare to face. I really don't see how anyone will enjoy fighting this thing. Even for DDs, I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to fight this thing. Smoke up, try to shoot him, but because of his speed, he's gonna disengage very quickly. It's gonna be chipping him down extremely slowly, much like a Kleber. But at least with the Kleber, if you bait out his reload booster, he will be significantly weakened. With the Marceau, not so much. So fighting this ship is going to be a rough experience from start to finish, and honestly I'm not too positive about the addition of this one. Unlike the Swedish or pan-European DDs, which I think look quite fun, they have clear weaknesses and clear strengths. The Marceau, yes, it has clear weaknesses. You can't really go into caps because your concealment is so bad. You can't. You're like you're gonna be reset. You're gonna be farmed if you try to push in. But because you have such range and such farming potential, you don't really want to go into the caps. You're just another long-range HE spammer. And honestly, I speak with thousands of people on a daily basis, and not once in basically the past year have I heard someone say that, Flamu, I think Wargaming should add another HE spammer to the game. Not once have I heard anyone utter that. So I do have to wonder where Wargaming got the idea that this kind of addition to the game would be a positive one, because Jesus, this looks awful. That's just a simple way of putting it. It just looks awful. I ended up on the top score of my team. Not too much damage, actually. We got a fair bit of basic speed because, well, we killed some high value targets like the DDs. Detailed report though, I did say I had horrendous RNG this game, and if we look at the RNG we can see that I got 347 HE hits and only 3 fires, and they did almost no damage either. You can absolutely farm 200,000 damage games plus in this thing. All you need to do is find a couple of battleships and then you just sail around being unhittable while farming them all game. Is it a fun experience for the DDs or for the BBs? Absolutely not. Is it a fun experience for this DD? Well, I mean, it's pretty okay to play as it, but it's just another HE spammer. Why did we need this again? Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching. If you can be arsed to drop me a sub, I really do appreciate it, and I will talk to you guys later.